world's most electric stars. In gymnastics, after a dominant performance by the Fierce Five in 2012, the U.S. women look to defend their London gold. In a nation where soccer thrives, Team USA will try to win a fourth straight Olympic title. The best players on sand will clash at the world-famous Copacabana Beach, the ideal venue for the ultimate beach volleyball party. In the pool, teenage Sue Jessica Long, the 12-time Paralympics gold medalist.
Jessica Long, gold once again.
The best athletes in the world head for a spectacular South American setting for the 2016 Olympics and
accustomed to preparing in the final stages on site in the country to acclimate themselves to the conditions, the weather, the atmosphere. This time around, with the threat of Zika plus the viral and bacterial pathogens in the waters, I'm sure it's changed plans, maybe as we speak. To what extent have these plans prearranged years ago leading up to Rio changed, and how are you flexing to accommodate concerns about practicing, readying on site days before the Olympics?
So we're looking at each sport individually, and we're going through and planning out the exact program with each sport right now. And we have some flexibility. I mean, frankly, we make plans well in advance so that we have options, but those options get exercised as you get close to the games and you see which athletes are going to qualify and what the best preparation plan is. So we're in the process right now of actually working on each individual plan with the sports and the disciplines. You know, I would say that sports like sailing have been down and sailing in the bay there for years now. And one of the things that's been very good about what they've done is they've got some really rigorous protocols that they utilize in order to keep their athletes healthy and safe. The athletes love sailing in the bay there. The currents are good, the wind is good, but you got to be careful and you got to make sure you follow the protocols, and they've done that well. That's exactly the same sort of thing we're going to look at in every single sport, so that we do the best thing we can to prepare the athletes and to put them in the position to succeed. But also, you know, our number one concern is to maintain their health and safety. So we're going to customize and look at each individual situation and be adjustable.
We got a question here from Nick, and then we're going to go over here, Dino, to the left.
Good morning, Nick Wooliver, Olympic Rings and Other Things. Two questions. Was there a business reason or a lesson learned for moving the media summit earlier? And also, what do you think are the biggest challenges or Achilles heels for LA 2024 enjoying popular support here locally?
I'll take the first question. Nick, we go out to all of our NGBs and then work with them on what's the best date to get the most athletes available for all of you to interview. So we've tried to find somewhere between basically now and May is usually that calendar. We don't want to be too close to an Olympic Games so that we're interrupting final stages of training, but we try to be close enough so we have some sense of who the right athletes will be. So we just try to work on a date that works for our NGBs in the broadest sense. It doesn't work for every athlete, unfortunately, it never will. But for us, it's just trying to get the most athletes available that we think will be in the games. And then the LA question, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Yeah, I think one of LA's biggest challenges is going to be that we have 4 world-class cities competing to host the 2024 World Games. I think LA's bid is very, very strong. But I think the difficulty in any competition like this is that there are a lot of great cities who would love to host the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and 2024 is no different. So being able to distinguish yourselves from those other cities is the greatest challenge.
We've got a question here. Nancy Armour.
Nancy Armour, USA Today Sports. This is for Larry and Scott. There's been so much talk about Zika, and some of your female athletes have already expressed concern about the impact that it could have. What steps is the USOC taking, and will you do things like provide your athletes with mosquito netting for their rooms?
So our approach to this is four-pronged. We want to get the best information that we can, and we're working with the WHO, the IOC, Centers for Disease Control to make sure that we have the best and most up-to-date information possible. We're trying to push that out to our athletes in the most efficient way possible. We've got it posted on our website. We're also communicating very directly with our NGBs. We want to mitigate on the ground to the greatest extent possible, and yes, we will be providing advice on things like mosquito netting and bug repellent and standing water and clothing and all of those things that can lessen the likelihood that there's going to be an infection. We're also going to make sure that we've got an appropriate level of medical support on the ground, so that if we are experiencing conditions there, people are getting infected, that we can treat it quickly and in a way that lessens the likelihood that it has an impact on the competition.
And we're going to have a question back here on the left of Bonnie. Before we go to Bonnie, the website, teamusa.org/Rio travel updates, will have all the information as it comes in that we disseminate to our athletes. It'll be also available there for the public to see. For all of you, I encourage you to go there. Just last week, we announced an advisory panel of 3 doctors assisting us, and that information is up there. In the back here, Bonnie.
I want to follow Eddie's question about Russia. Given the depth of the culture of doping that was revealed there by the independent commission report, given the recent revelations, how in the world can this country be compliant in 150 days?
So my response to that would be that's not for the USOC to judge. That's something that the IAAF organization is going to have to assess and evaluate and make a decision. And as I said, they've appointed a task force. I think that task force has been to Russia 4 different times. They're reporting back to the leadership group later this week. And again, the IAAF, in consultation with WADA and the IOC, will make a decision.
Great. Next question. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you here, John.
I'd like to follow up on the doping question. In 2000, WADA was created to oversee anti-doping efforts around the world, but it was a monitoring agency. It didn't conduct tests. It doesn't conduct tests. Here we are 16 years later. There are countries that that don't have anti-doping agencies. There are some that have weak anti-doping agencies. Is it time for WADA to get in the business of actually going out and conducting tests rather than quote-unquote monitoring the testing that's going on? There's also federations that test better than others. Is it time for WADA to get in the business of conducting anti-doping tests?
Well, that is something that Thomas Bach is advocating WADA to take over. Drug testing across all different sporting competitions and in all countries. And I think Sir Craig Reedy, the leader of WADA, has taken that under consideration. They're studying that idea, that proposal. Obviously, there's some pretty significant financial implications that go along with that. But I know that President Bach and the executive board of the IOC favor that approach. They're pushing that approach. They're advocating that approach, and it's being carefully studied by WADA, and we'll see where that ends up, hopefully sooner rather than later.
And to borrow a phrase from Alan, that's a really complicated piece of business, and there are good reasons to adopt either structure. I think the good news is there's a recognition that we need to evolve, we need to change, we need to invest more, and it's very, very reassuring that the IOC and WADA seem to be doing that in concert and with a view to kind of the end game, a long-term game, as opposed to trying to react to a short-term situation.
Great. We've got a question here in the front. Again, if you could just state your name and your outlet, that'd be great.
Scott Malone from Reuters News. Question on Zika. What we've been hearing from you gentlemen and the athletes so far is that you're getting a lot of information to them, communicating with them. At the end of the day, is it going to be just an athlete-by-athlete decision whether they're comfortable with the risk that they're looking at?
Yes, based on the information that we have today, we are not looking at any overall options, and it is going to be up to each individual athlete to make his or her decision on whether or not they want to attend. I'm not aware of a single athlete who has made a decision not to attend because of any conditions in Rio.
We have a question here with Ed, and then Ben after that.
Ed Hula from Around the Rings. Question for Lisa Baird. about sponsorship activation for Rio and their involvement. Why do you think Rio is such a interesting proposition? Why is it going to be such a benefit for your sponsors? And are they, and they tell me they're running into challenges dealing with Rio de Janeiro and their own hospitality plans. How is the situation in Rio complicating that as well?
Well, you know, I think you said it first, Ed. I think from the work that I've seen now, which is launching, our sponsors are really excited about the Rio Games, Olympic and Paralympic, and what it holds. So many have announced their athlete ambassadors. Just yesterday, Dick's Sporting Goods launched their campaign, which is about the contenders. They've hired 200 athletes, hopefuls, to work in Dick's stores, and they're telling the stories about the journeys of going to Rio. We're looking at some pretty exciting things to happen on the ground in Rio with our sponsors in USA House. We've announced that we are doing a special project with Colegio Sao Paulo. It's right on Ipanema Beach. It's a beautiful Catholic church, school. About a third of the children are educated from the favelas, and our sponsors have embraced this. And we're going to see more activation in that house, and we're going to leave that particular school with some world-class technology, and just hope that we can leave a great legacy. So from what we're seeing, again, I haven't seen this much activation here in the U.S. and pointing towards Rio in any previous games, even London.
Right here in the front.
Ben Fisher, Sports Business Journal. This is for Larry and Scott. Scott, I know you've said several times that there is no plan B for whatever question might be raised about challenges that Rio is facing, and that you're committed to it, and that really there's not a lot the IOC can do sometimes after the bid has been awarded. I wonder now, in the spirit of the reform world that is now coming out of Switzerland, whether you all would support some system of creating a plan B, selecting an alternate bid city someday, or some other method by which you could have more leverage over a bid city in the future should things start to fall apart.
You know, I think we have to recognize what our role is. We're one of over 200 countries that participates in the Olympic Games, and by definition, you have to have somebody who is in charge of the overall project, and those have to be people who look to the health and welfare and safety of all of the athletes. But, you know, every single Games brings on its own unique set of challenges that cause people to question whether the game should have been awarded to X. So that, you know, this Zika virus and the water quality and others are serious issues, and they're real issues, but they're not unique in the sense that we face issues with respect to every Olympic and Paralympic Games, because it's a really complicated process. It's a multi-sport global event, lots and lots of sports, lots and lots of venues, lots and lots of moving pieces. And so, you know, at this point, I wouldn't say we've gotten to the point where we need to even look at that as an alternative.
So we're going to go to Jason and then to Liz after that.
Jason Gewirtz with Sports Travel Magazine. Alan, or possibly Scott. Alan, you talked about the state of the sailing venue. I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit about your thoughts on where that venue is at right now, but also the other venues. Are there any venues in Rio at this point that you're concerned about one way or the other?
So first of all, I'm not really concerned about any of the venues. I think that the Rio Organizing Committee has done a really good job under pretty tough circumstances of focusing on the athletes and making sure that they do everything they can to put together a great experience for the athletes. And while they've had to make adjustments, and you know, we all have been reading about, you know, the challenges they've had with their economy, the reality is they've stayed true to the mission in our dealings with them as it relates to servicing the athletes. So I think that they're doing a good job of making sure the venues are going to be ready and going to be great competition venues when we show up in August and September. The sailing venue is an interesting one because I think that they have taken a lot of steps to mitigate the pollution in the bay. And while it's, you know, not clean yet, and I think that, you know, that is something they're striving towards. If you look at, as an example, they have a website. It's all in Portuguese, but it's basically the Rio City website, which posts information about their mitigation processes. And they've taken a great deal of they've done a lot of work to figure out how to control the pollution that's going into the bay, and many of those projects are actually coming to conclusion now. As an example, I think there's an area right around the Gloria Marina where the start and finish area is for some of the events that was pretty serious, and they've at the end of this month, early in April, they'll have that basically cut off and into a normal sewage treatment system. And so it's getting better. I think they're making improvements. It's not perfect, but the combination of their efforts and the effort that's been put in by Rio, along with our efforts to make sure that we're really having good protocols with our athletes, is combined to actually put us in a pretty good place there. So I see progress. I think there's a lot of discussion about what's not happening, but I also see that a lot has happened.
Right up here, Dino, and then we'll come back further up.
Oh, sorry. Yes, this is for follows on that same topic. You had said earlier, you mentioned that sailing in particular had already instituted some really rigorous protocols for athlete safety. Can you put any meat on the bones? Like, what are some examples of what is part of that rigorous protocol that gives you confidence? And then the other question, obviously Zika poses a particular risk to female athletes of childbearing age. So I'm wondering if the USOC, in disseminating information to its athletes, can you tell us anything in particular that's being done, to help your female athletes negotiate this decision for themselves?
Yep. So on the first question, it's actually protocols that, whether it's rowing, canoe kayak, sailing, swimming, triathlon, they're very good about saying, okay, here's how basically you want to interact with your training environment in terms of the cleanliness of your paddles, the cleanliness of your boats, how you drink and carry water in your boats, all sorts of really, specific recommendations that they give to the athletes, so that ultimately what happens is they keep themselves hygienically really in a good spot and don't contaminate themselves. And they've it's clear these athletes and these sports have competed all over the world and had many challenges like this, and so over the years they've been able to develop these protocols. And like I say, it's everything from where you store your boat and what you do when you pull your boat out of the water, what you do with what you take on your boat, what you do with your clothes in terms of washing them and keeping them clean. And they've just been very smart. It's not, this is not complicated, but what I love about it is that they've interacted very well with their athletes to make sure that they give them good information, and it's worked quite well. Sailing has been very successful at staying healthy and having a great experience down there. As it relates to the Zika virus, we've, our main emphasis is to communicate and educate, because in the end, I think that it's got to be the athlete's decision. It's their Olympic Games. They're the ones that qualify for it. They're the ones that make a choice. And the best thing we can do is just to provide them as much clear information as they can, and then leave it to they and their families to make the very best decision for them as a family and as individuals. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
What I would add to that is that we did make sure when we appointed this infectious disease advisory group that we had at least one female physician as a part of that group. In fact, right now 2 out of the 3 physicians who are supporting us on that are females, and we recognize that women are the primary decision makers when it comes to the health of unborn children, who the real risk is to the unborn child, right, at the end of the day. But women are the primary caretakers for the care of that unborn child, and for that reason we wanted to make sure that we had somebody that they could talk to and feel comfortable talking with. Some cases that's going to be women, in other cases men, I assume, but we wanted to make sure they had both options.
We've got time for just a few more questions. Okay, we'll come back. We'll come here first, and then we'll go back.
Hi, Kelsey Meyer, CBS News. With respect to the U.S. Olympic logo, are the athletes going to compete with the 13-star Team USA patch or the 50-star American flag?
The answer is both. We use the 13-star, which is an official American flag, on our logo, which you see here because of sizing, and it is an officially recognized flag by the United States government. But at points you might see some of the athletes in their performance gear when they're on the field, they may actually have the 50-star flag. So on the athletes will likely be both.
Great. Come right back here.
Yeah, Tom Burke once again. Scott, a question for you. Kudos to the USOC for forming the advisory group, and I think USOC's working in record time compared to maybe the CDC and WHO. We're slow to respond. But my question is, the advisory group is going to be working closely with your medical staff, trainers, sports psychologists. I'm sure they weren't expecting additional roles to be placed on them. How overstretched and strapped will your staff members be? Are you planning to hire more to work with athletes and involving these folks in conjunction with the advisory group to step it up and take on more responsibility?
So that's a great question, and one that we pondered when we formed the advisory group. And what we decided is we don't know what kind of volume we're going to get. We have 550 Olympic athletes, approximately 265 Paralympic athletes. We have our whole delegation with that. Based on the volume of, throughput to this group at this point, we're not concerned about it, but we want to watch it very, very closely to make sure that we do have the resources not only to be able to answer the questions, but also allow the people involved to do the things that we had always planned for them to do in Rio.
Great. We're going to go here, and then we've got time for 2 more questions. We're going to go back over here.
Good morning. Dave Sheinin from the Washington Post. Are you aware of any female athletes who will be pregnant but for the Rio Games? And also, is there, granted it being their decision to ultimately whether to go or not, would the advisory board possibly give the advisory to skip the games if you are pregnant?
So, first question, I am not aware of any athletes who are pregnant and planning to compete in the games. Alan, are you? So that's not to say that they're not out there. One of the great things about having an advisory group is that there's some level of independence that comes with it. I don't know what kind of advice that they're going to come up with. I think our sense is that the more we put the decision in the hands of the individual athletes with the best information possible, the better position we're in to stay what we are, which is truly a sports organization, not a health policy organization. So we want to comply with the health policies and recommendations of the Centers for Disease Control as much as we can. We want to make sure that we make resources like the independent advisory group available to our athletes, but to the greatest extent possible. I don't think we want to be in the business of making health policy.
Great. Any question back over here, right here? And we'll have time for one more after this.
Thank you. It's for Larry and Scott. I'm Amanda from Brazil, from TV Global. Talking about the information from Zika, Team USA is also aware that the incidence of Zika and other mosquitoes diseases that we have in Brazil decreases after the end of Brazilian summer, and you're also working of this in the plans that you have for the Olympics?
So I'm not sure I heard the end of your question, but yes, we are aware that the risk should decrease as you move from summer to winter. Look, we're also aware that this is not just a problem in Brazil. This is very much a problem in the Americas, in other countries in South America, and I think we're expecting to see increased incidence of Zika in the United States this summer ourselves. So this is by no means a problem that's unique to Brazil.
Great, and we're going to go last question with Ben Fisher, Sports Business Journal.
Lisa, you said at the beginning this is going to be the most marketed Olympics. Why is that? Is that primarily the establishment's doing, or is there something out in the market that is different from this time around?
Well, I'd like to think it was part of the establishment's doing, but I won't be a little humble here. First of all, I think it's a great city. Anybody who's been to Rio realizes it's one of the most special cities there are, and I think people are just open to celebrating that. Number two is NBC, who has started their promotion of the games, is really exciting Americans, and I think the appetite to watch these athletes, and it is going to be at Olympics all the time now, since we think we'll see a fair amount of events live streamed. So we've got to look at what NBC is doing to promote the games, and I think it's reaching new levels. We have 39 sponsors. We work very closely with them to develop their promotion programs, and I can tell you, almost to every one has something very, very special planned. So I think that when that all comes together, what you hope as a marketer is that, it really breaks through on the American consciousness. This is one of those special things that brings our country together, right? Rooting for these athletes, and I mean Olympians and Paralympians. And I think in August of next year, we're just going to see a rise of just cheering from America for what's going to happen in Brazil. So I just feel like this may be some of the establishment, but I put my hat off to Brazil for a great city and a great vision for games, our partner NBC, and what I think are some really, really great creative plans from our sponsors.
Yeah, the only thing I would add with regard to NBC and televising these Olympics, I know that their entire organization is really, really excited about this. Despite some of the challenges that have been encountered preparing the venues, these venues are going to look amazing on television. Rio is a city of incredible beauty. And combine that with the fact that in the months of August and September, it's a 1-hour time difference off of the Eastern daylight savings time. So I think viewership is going to be really, really strong around these Olympics. It's going to look spectacular on television. I think it's going to be a great environment for our athletes.
The one thing I wanted to add earlier was this press conference, along with all of our press conferences, the audio will be online within about an hour-ish at teamusa.org in our media section. So if there's anything you missed, you can get the audio there. I would like to just thank everyone for this. This concludes our press conference. Next up is the IPC press conference. We've got a couple of special great guests. We've got Sir Philip Craven here, Tatiana McFadden, and our Chief of Paralympics, and Rick Adams. So that's coming up in about 15 minutes or so at 11:15. So with that, thank you, everyone, and have a great Media Summit.